In the shadowed halls of medieval Europe, justice often wore a mask, and rarely one of mercy. When we ask the question, which country had the harshest laws in the Middle Ages, we do not seek a simple answer. We seek the darkest corner of a brutal past. And perhaps, as we peel away the layers, we will find more than just punishment. We may find a warning. Across the kingdoms, from the frostbitten fjords of Norway to the sun-scorched courts of Castile, cruelty had many faces. But one realm, time and again, rises in whispers of dread: the Holy Roman Empire, not merely a country but a fractured collection of principalities, each with its own twisted take on law. And yet, they shared one thing: a thirst for order, no matter the cost. Imagine this: a woman accused of theft, not caught red-handed, not seen, merely accused. Her fate: to plunge her hand into a boiling cauldron of water. If, after 3 days, the wound festered, she was guilty. If not, she was free. Justice by infection. They called it trial by ordeal. It was legal, it was righteous, it was horrifying, but this is only the surface. For in Bamberg, one of the empire's judicial strongholds, records tell of a time when even rumors could get you hanged. The Malefus House, the House of Crimes, was a place where prisoners were chained in total darkness. Rats whispered, some were left for weeks, months, no trial, no voice. They were forgotten. Their only crime: gossip, disloyal words, a strange birthmark, or looking a judge in the eye. And then came the witch trials. Ah yes, the witch trials. Long before Salem, Bamberg again leads the charge. One inquisitor, Johann Georg Fuchs von Dornheim, was known as the Witch Bishop. He built an entire prison for accused witches, painted with scenes of fire and damnation, as if to prepare the women for hell. They say he tortured children for confessions, even noblemen, entire families wiped out. Why? For weather, a failed harvest, a cold winter. That's all it took. The devil must be among us, they cried, and the law agreed. But here's a question no one asks: who profited? Records show that the bishop confiscated lands and wealth from the accused. Executions were followed by auctions. It wasn't justice, it was policy, a machine. And this wasn't isolated. The Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, Emperor Charles V's famous legal code, codified torture into the very fabric of imperial justice. It wasn't an exception, it was the rule. If a suspect denied guilt, the judge was required to torture him until he confessed. Required, imagine that. A system where pain wasn't a possibility, it was the procedure. And then comes the question: was this truly law, or a tool of fear? Who wrote the rules? And who were they meant to silence? But what if the law wasn't just about obedience? What if it was about control, carefully designed to keep the population in check through terror? In the Kingdom of France, under the rule of King Philippe IV, known as the Iron King, justice wore an even colder expression. This was the monarch who, in 1307, orchestrated one of the most chilling legal massacres of the medieval era: the destruction of the Knights Templar. The official charge: heresy, sodomy, devil worship. But the truth, far more. The Templars were wealthy, too wealthy. They had lent vast sums to the king, and when he could not pay his debts, he chose to burn his creditors. Literally, arrests were made in one coordinated sweep across all of France. In the dead of night, the accused were chained, interrogated, tortured. Some confessed, most didn't live long enough to. Their assets seized, their reputation erased, and the people stunned into silence, watched as their guardians were turned into monsters. Did Felipe truly believe in the charges, or was this a financial coup cloaked in holy wrath? Documents recovered centuries later reveal confessions extracted after brutal torment. Prisoners had their legs crushed, their genitals burned. Many were left naked for weeks in icy cells. The inquisitors didn't ask for answers. They asked for guilt, and they always got it. But here's where the tale turns darker. One Templar Grand Master, Jacques de Maillet, recanted his confession. He stood tall in front of the Notre Dame and declared it all a lie. Hours later, he was burned alive. The flames, they say, lit the saint red. Witnesses described an eerie calm on his face, and as the fire consumed him, he cursed the king and the pope, both of whom died within the year. Coincidence or something else? France had sent a message: power is above truth, the law is a weapon. And yet, travel eastward to Hungary, and we meet a figure who turns even that notion into a nightmare. Known now as the Blood Countess, she was accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of young girls, allegedly to bathe in their blood. The crimes sound apocryphal, grotesque, but the trial, even worse. She was never allowed to speak in her defense. Her servants were tortured until their stories matched the court's expectations, and the details, so ghastly that historians still debate: was this justice, or a political assassination? You see, had power. She was wealthier than the King of Hungary. She ruled her own estates, commanded armies. Was she a monster, or a victim of one of the most elaborate smear campaigns in history? Because there were no witnesses who weren't paid, no confessions that weren't extracted through agony, and no trial, just a sentence sealed behind stone walls, where she was bricked into a room and left to die. We are left with the question, was she the killer, or was she the prey? And if that question haunts us, it should. Because the more we study medieval law, the more we see a terrifying pattern. Those who had power used the law to keep it, and those without became the law's victims. But what if we've only uncovered fragments? What if the records that survive, the confessions, the blood-soaked parchments are just shadows cast on the walls of history's cave? What was destroyed? What secrets were silenced forever? And so we return, not just to dungeons and gallows, but to the minds of those who enforced this justice. Who wrote the laws? Who interpreted the will of God as a justification for cruelty? Let us look now to England, a realm known for its Magna Carta and its reputation for planting the seeds of modern law. But beneath this noble image lies a truth no less grim. In the 13th and 14th centuries, the common man lived under the weight of forest law. Yes, a law not about people, but trees. Under the reign of Norman kings, vast swaths of land were declared royal forests. And to even so much as pick firewood from these areas was an act of treason. Not just theft, treason. A man caught hunting a deer in these forests could be blinded, mutilated, hung, children were whipped. Whole villages were punished for a single rabbit killed without permission. It wasn't about preserving nature, it was about preserving royal privilege. And what of sanctuary? The church, they said, was holy ground. But this sanctuary became a twisted game. Fugitives had 40 days to confess and accept exile, leave the kingdom forever, or face execution. Many confessed to crimes they never committed, choosing exile over the certainty of torture. Some vanished, others were hunted anyway. But perhaps the most chilling aspect was this. England's legal system was built on the assize-traveling judges, moving town to town, dispensing royal law. They brought with them not just verdicts, but in the assize of Clarendon, juries were introduced, but not as a safeguard for the innocent. Instead, neighbors were required to accuse one another or be fined. Justice was communal and compulsory. Imagine a village forced to condemn its own or risk retribution. The line between accusation and survival blurred. What happens to a society when betrayal becomes law? But even these horrors pale before the legal nightmare that unfolded in one small Alpine principality. Few know of the blood purge that occurred there in the 17th century. Fewer still speak of how 1 out of every 10 women was accused of witchcraft. In a single decade, the trials were relentless. Evidence, a neighbor's dream, a failed childbirth, a storm on the wrong day. The accused were often illiterate, poor, or outspoken. Their confessions were identical, because the questions were identical, and the pain was identical. Iron spikes under the fingernails, ropes pulling joints from sockets, thumbs crushed in vices. And who paid for these trials? The accused, yes, by law. The cost of torture, imprisonment, and execution was billed to the victim's family. If they couldn't pay, their land was seized, their livestock, their children, sometimes sold into servitude. Justice became a business, and business was good. How many of these deaths were real punishments, and how many were sanctioned robberies? Even today, some documents from these trials remain missing. Others are heavily redacted. Why? Who edited the past? And this brings us to the most terrifying question of all. Or was it always from the beginning a theater of pain, scripted by the powerful, performed on the bodies of the helpless? And if so, how much of our modern law is still built on its bones? We stare into the dark mirror of medieval law and begin to see something familiar. Not distant, not ancient, but uncomfortably close. Because even in those centuries of fire and iron, justice was not blind. It watched carefully. It looked at who you were, your name, your blood, your coin, and then decided if you were guilty. Take Spain, for instance, a land ablaze with devotion, pride, and power, but also with fear. During the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Spanish Inquisition began not as chaos, but as policy. Its aim, purity, religious unity, a nation cleansed of heresy. But what was heresy, and who decided? In truth, it became a code word. Heresy meant different. It meant Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, or merely too curious, too educated, owning a forbidden book, lighting candles on the wrong night, speaking Latin in your sleep. The Inquisition created a system unlike any before it. Tribunals held in secret, evidence withheld, accusers anonymous. You could not face your witnesses. You could not know your charges. And when you confessed, under the agonies of the rack, the strapido, or worse, it was taken as proof of guilt. They called it auto da fe, an act of faith. Public, theatrical, holy executions. Streets packed with cheering crowds. The condemned in black robes painted with flames, paraded, shamed, then tied to stakes and burned. This wasn't justice, it was ritual, a ceremony of fear. But what remains hidden? What archives have not been opened? To this day, thousands of Inquisition records remain locked in Vatican vaults. What truths do they still conceal? Could it be that some of the condemned were never heretics, but scientists, poets, thinkers, victims of a war on knowledge. Historians whisper of names struck from records, of entire families, and then there are the gaps. Years without any entries, trials without final sentences, scribes who died mysteriously. Did the law silence them or something more? And now, let us return, for one last glance, to the Holy Roman Empire, to a case that echoes like a scream across time. The trial of Agatha Grogner, 1589. A midwife, a healer, a widow. She delivered over 200 babies, saved countless lives. Then, one winter, a noble child, fingers pointed, the charge, sorcery, the evidence. A neighbor claimed Agatha owned a black cat. A dead goat was found near her home. She didn't cry at the funeral. She was taken to the iron chair, forced to sit on heated metal for hours. Her skin peeled, her voice broke, she confessed, but not once, not twice. 37 confessions in all, each one different, each more insane than the last. Flying on broomsticks, dancing with devils, poisoning wells. Why so many? Because each time the judges said, "You're lying, try again." And finally, her sentence, death by fire. But the townspeople begged for mercy. She was loved, respected. The court compromised, they strung-led her first. This was mercy. Centuries later, a manuscript surfaced, written by a priest who witnessed it all. In it, he writes, "She died with open eyes, and I swear to God, I saw no guilt in them." So what was it all for? What was law in a world like this? Perhaps it was never meant to protect the innocent, but to remind the weak who ruled. And the more gruesome the punishment, the more silent the people. Which brings us back to the question we started with. Which country had the harshest laws in medieval Europe? The answer is not a country. It is a truth. Wherever fear ruled over reason, wherever justice bowed to power, that was the harshest land. And perhaps the most terrifying part is this. It wasn't the punishments that made the law cruel. It was how normal they became, how pain became policy, how horror became order. So now, we ask again, but this time not of the past. What does your law protect? And who does it serve?